The presidential election process is more complicated than we think. The public is not just voting for the president directly, but we're using a process called the Electoral College to indirectly vote for the president. First, we need to understand the concept of electoral votes. In each state, including the District of Columbia, the public will vote on their choice of president, which is actually an elector that will represent the vote for a presidential candidate. There are a certain amount of electors in each state, and whichever president wins the vote for a state, all the electors will vote for that president at the election, earning the president that state's amount of electoral votes. An electoral vote is represented by one elector. Since there are a varying amount of electors in each state, the state's number of electoral votes may also vary. Each state automatically gets 2 electoral votes because each state will have 2 people from the Senate that will act as an elector. Then, the rest of the electoral votes may vary by population of each state because the state will also have a varying amount of members in the House of Representatives that will act as electors. There are 538 total electoral votes in the United States, and the president will need to win a majority of those votes, which is 270. Now the electors will meet up at the presidential election and cast their vote on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December after the presidential election. Once the votes are cast, they are recorded on the certificate of vote. And after the president is elected, the governor of each state will create a list of the presidential candidates and the electors of that state that voted. This is the certificate of ascertainment, and once created, it's delivered to the Congress and recorded. That's the Electoral College.
There are numerous roles of the POTUS. The POTUS, if you don't already know, is the President of the United States. The President is the chief of the state. As this position, he is in charge of entertaining foreign leaders, promoting worthy causes such as gay rights, and he also awards medals to military heroes. The President is also the chief executive, which makes him in charge of the government while making the laws enforced. While being the head of the government, the President is also the leader of his political party and also helps campaign and endorse his party. As Commander-in-Chief, the President is in charge of all armed forces. He is responsible for raising, training, supervising, and deploying all these forces. As chief diplomat, the President appoints the ambassador to the UN, who speaks for the U.S., and he also negotiates and even signs treaties with other countries. Lastly, he travels to other countries around the world to share his word of the position of the United States in foreign affairs. Lastly, the President is the legislative leader. He makes a speech about every January of each year, and in the speech he evaluates the country's positions and also states what he wants for the country in the next year.
The U.S. government is made up of one chief executive, the President. When the Constitution was being written, it was suggested that the government institute a 12-party council to act as chief executives. At the time, it was feared that if there were a singular president, the U.S. government would become more like the oppressive English monarchy, but it was also feared that more than one president would result in internal strife and opposition. Thomas Jefferson, in an argument against a 12-party council, used France's Directory as an example. The Directory lasted from 1795 to 1799. Internal conflict and different opinions caused strife within the Directory, and by 1795, the whole thing was rendered useless due to public distrust and outrageous inflation. Although a great example, John Calhoun offered a different solution: 2 presidents. The duties of the singular president would be split between 2 people, being able to result in a more focused leadership. Congress would keep strife from happening within the 2 presidents, and that would lead to more harmony within the rest of the government. Today, once elected, representatives get to Washington and prioritize getting partisan victories rather than promoting public interest. What the president's power encompasses now was not as much as it was back when the founders created the government, and thus it is more vulnerable to the corruption the founders feared in the first place. Since America has grown and expanded since the days of the founding fathers, perhaps it would be beneficial to the American government system to play with the idea of institutionalizing a bipartisan presidency, putting John Calhoun's suggestion of a two-person presidency into action, or even revisiting the 12 Council suggestion.
Historical and contemporary roles of political parties. Political parties in America started in the late 1700s when the 13th state nation was divided by opinion on the ratification of the Constitution. There were the Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, who believed in a strong central government, and the Anti-Federalists, or Democratic Republicans, who rallied around Thomas Jefferson, who believed that the states were better running themselves in a confederacy. After these political parties changed in name, opinions, and members, we as Americans are left with drastically different Democrats and Republicans. Our democracy has turned from making fair and collective decisions into the struggle for power between these political parties. This issue is affecting the impact that the President of the United States can have on the country during his term. For example, the Equal Pay for Equal Work bill that President Obama introduced that was aiming to help women around the country receive equal pay for the same work done by their male counterpart. This bill was put into motion by the Democratic Party, but was halted by the votes of the Republican representation in Congress. This is just an example of the complete opposition of one party to another, making it hard for President Obama to make any positive change in the lives of Americans. In conclusion, these political parties have been spending their time rivaling rather than coming up with solutions to help their country. This is affecting everyone, including the president.